You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello, and welcome to another wonderful episode of Business Wealth Impact. Today, our wonderful guest is Christine Handy. Christine's an international print and runway model, and also the author of the book Walk Beside Me, which is a fictional depiction of Christine's life. Christine became a keynote speaker after a book was published in 2016. She's also a mentor, breast cancer advocate, public figure, and is nationally recognized as a humanitarian and a mother of two sons. Christine serves on the board of three nonprofit organizations, People of Purpose, the Break Free Foundation, and the Wonder Women Initiative. Christine's first novel was made into a film called Hello Beautiful and will be released in the fall of 2025.
Well,
that's correct.
It's coming out in March.
Good.
It's a moving target.
There we go. Because I had a different date and I thought that can't be right. Okay. So welcome, Christine. I'm thrilled to have you here. So why don't you just start telling people about like what happened with your modeling career and the breast cancer and everything that unfolded?
Wow. Okay. Well, I don't know where to begin, but I'll start when I was young and decided to model when I was 11 years old and became kind of a champion for the industry. I stayed in the industry as a model for about 30 years and out of nowhere was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 41. No family history. Literally, I was the healthiest, unhealthy person you have ever seen in your life. And that really tidal waved me into this massive depression and uncertainty as to who I was and what was my purpose in this life if I wasn't the pretty girl, if I wasn't on in a magazine or on a billboard. And, you know, when you're in that industry for so long, it becomes a part of you. And no disrespect to the industry, I'm actually still in the industry and I love it. So I did a lot of introspective work during that time of illness because I had 15 months of chemotherapy and lost my hair and lost what I felt was my beauty externally, which I was really dependent on, external everything, materialism and external beauty and relationships and the right street address and the right bag. And it's not the most flattering story, but it's honest. And when I was going through the illness debacles, there were three of them, but most significantly the breast cancer, I was going through this time of introspective work and thought to myself, man, if I survive this, I think I should have a different purpose, not as a consumer, but maybe as somebody that wants to serve humanity. And what does that look like? And so I went on this different path and I decided, well, I'm going to start with writing a book. And if that's well received, then maybe that leads me into a different path. And ultimately it was well received and became recently a movie, which will be out in March. But I think that the reason, one, I was a full stop when have that type of illness and as sick as I was. And when you have a full stop like that, it can be an opportunity to look at your life and do that work of introspection. Now, in the beginning, it was kind of emotionally paralyzing because I had that dependency on external value. And when I rebuilt my life, it was all based on my incredible courage and strength that comes from within. My beauty, everybody's beauty is really internal. And it's how we perceive that. And so I rebuilt my life on faith and hope and measured my life on how well I could serve other people, not how well I could serve myself. And so ultimately, I lost my chest to not just breast cancer. I had mastectomies and I had implants, but ultimately I lost it to the breast implant illness in 2020. And it was during that time, now that was like the third or fourth major illness. It was during that time where I was like, okay, I really have to come back into the modeling space because I have to show the world. I can preach the preach and I can talk the talk, but I would need to walk the walk. I need to go back into the modeling space and show people that my value is not negated because I lost my chest. My value wasn't stripped from me because I lost my health for a season of my life. And so I went back and started modeling in New York Fashion Week as well as Miami Swim Week, and partnered with major brands. I
Mm.
became Victoria's Secret first ever breastless model, and had a real impact. And people really started to pay attention because they thought, wow, I mean, if she can do that at 50 years old and modeling in New York Fashion Week or Miami Swim Week in a bathing suit at the age of 50, then maybe this self-esteem thing that she's talking about makes sense. And maybe I should
Mm.
look into, focusing on that and not so much external like we do in
Right.
society.
Right. Okay. Well, I think it's amazing that they even agreed to do that. So something shifted in the industry, because
Right.
years ago they never would have ever even thought of doing that. Right. So
Correct.
it's quite incredible. When did you do that? When were you doing the first runway?
So I started in 2021
Mm.
and still do it.
Mhm.
I have a modeling agency in New York, and I quite honestly, I work a lot.
Mm.
But you're right. It's the brands that made the commitment to use me that are really the
Right.
game changers. It's it's
Yes.
it's Victoria's Secret, it's Sports Illustrated, it's Cup
Mhm.
Sheets, all these brands that
Mhm.
made that commitment. And I had the idea, but it's them
Mhm.
signing on and saying, yes, we will do this in their platform, which
Yes.
elevates the idea.
Right. Because let's face it, many women have breast cancer.
Oh,
Several of
too
my
many.
friends, several of my friends have had breast cancer. So it's not something that's rare, and
No.
it's very empowering for people, because what you've said, I've heard them all, all of them say,
Yeah.
you're lost, right?
Yeah.
And especially for somebody that was a model where it's all exterior.
Yeah.
And I think that's really brave of you to basically say that you had a kind of you sort of kind of like superficial life, right?
Very superficial life.
Okay.
And focused on that.
Right.
Yeah.
So how has your life changed now? I mean, you're helping people. So what is your purpose, and how has your everyday life changed now that you're not living a superficial life? That's what fascinates me.
Well, your identity definitely shifts, and because I don't live a superficial life, I'm not tethered to what people think of me. I
Mm.
think when you live a superficial life, you're tethered to, well, if I need this bag to walk out of my house to feel like I belong in
Mm.
certain places in society, then I'm tethered to whether people like that or not, right?
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
that's transactional. But if you
Yes.
let go of your ego and you let go of all transaction in your life, especially in the modeling industry, way back when I was modeling, as a 20-year-old, the photographers would say, if you do this job for me, I'll get you in with this client. That's very
Mm.
transactional.
Yes.
And when you come down to nothing and you rebuild your life, that was one of the tenets that I said, I'll never be transactional again. So
Mm.
I get to live a life that is independent of that transaction, which is very freeing. I get
Mhm.
to live a life of being a facilitator on my terms.
Mhm.
I get to share my story, but in a vulnerable and honest way. Obviously, I'm not telling my story in a way that is, oh, I had all these people show up for me, and they cooked for me every night, and they brought all these gifts, and I'm way better off now because my beautiful blonde hair grew back. I mean, that's a different story. And
Mhm.
I can tell that story, but that's not the
Mm.
truth.
Mhm.
And so we are all capable of being honest with our stories, and social media, I think, has limited us in a way where people are afraid to do that because other people's stories that
Mhm.
are out there on social media look so much prettier, but they're
Mhm.
not. They're putting their highlight reels out there.
Exactly. It's the best moments
And
ever. Yeah.
I'm not immune to it, and it's not that I have
Mhm.
never done that. Like
Right.
there's a movie about my life, but the movie about let's go with the movie about my life. The push to have the movie about my life was not, in from my personal perspective, a push because it had my name attached to it. When
Mhm.
I was going through breast cancer, and I can tell you from people I've spoken to, anytime, not always, but anytime people are diagnosed with an illness, there's a massive amount of information, medical information, that they have to inundate with them inside of
Yes.
themselves. And it's overwhelming. And so what people cling to often are watching movies or TV shows about that particular illness
Mm.
or trauma. And when I was going through breast cancer, I did the same thing. And so I sought out movies and TV shows about breast cancer. And quite honestly, almost all of them ended in a funeral. And I
Mm.
felt this righteous anger about that. Why were we portraying this one and truthful ending, right? It does happen, but it's not the only ending.
It's not the only ending. I mean, I think 4 of my friends have had breast cancer. They're all still alive.
Exactly. But why
Y
aren't we
Yeah,
showing that in media?
exactly. Why is it always it was 'cause it's dramatic.
But
Yeah.
so I wanted to shift that.
Mhm,
And so I thought, well, if I can get this movie made about my story, then I'm giving the world
mhm,
a hopeful ending, a source of survival that they can
mhm,
look to when they're going through something similar. So that's the motivation. We always have to
mhm.
check, like, what's our motivation behind
Yes.
certain things? And that's my motivation. So again, going back to your question, what do I do every day? I give people hope. I consider
Mm.
myself a hope facilitator.
Okay, I love that. Now, I'm interested. I used to be a fashion designer, okay? But the
Amazing.
funny thing is, I was never attached to it. In fact, I stopped being a fashion designer about 2 years after I started because I found the whole fashion industry very superficial, and I didn't like it.
And transactional.
And transactional, just and also very super. And I thought, this is I love fashion.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't love fashion. After that, I did not care. I on purpose would wear torn jeans and not care and just buy secondhand clothes, kind of almost as like a, you know, it's like a statement, right?
Mm.
So I do appreciate fashion, obviously, but the whole industry is very superficial. I mean, it's horribly superficial, right?
Yes.
So I figured that out pretty soon. So now what's your relationship to bags and clothes and shoes? That's what I think people are probably interested in hearing that. And maybe people don't ask you.
Well, bags and clothes and shoes are actually called accessories, right?
Right.
But when you're coveting that, it's not really an accessory.
Mm,
It becomes more of an addiction. And
hmm.
so bags and clothes and shoes really are an accessory to me.
Hmm.
I put them on and sometimes I dress up and I like that. There's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with that. But
Yeah.
if your measure is based on what you have or what
Hmm.
you're clinging to and those things are material,
Hmm.
that's not an accessory anymore.
No, it's not. It's part of your identity that you have to have an object to feel a certain way.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so they are my accessories, and I'm very proud to
Right.
say that.
I'm glad, I want to talk about that because a lot of people have shopping addictions and belonging addictions, and it's still an addiction and it's still a problem. And a lot of their money is going into shoes, and of course
Yeah.
we need to look good, and but it's always about the measure of how much and how attached we are to it. I think.
Well,
Okay,
I need to look good for me,
yeah,
and
exactly.
that's different than looking good needing to look good for other people.
Right, and having to have a certain type of bag because it's a Louis Vuitton bag, and you can't have a bag on, you know,
It's a label.
I love when people are very wealthy and they're picking up a bag from Target and just wearing that because they don't care, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, now tell us about the movie.
Yeah, the movie. The movie's is so the book is a fictional depiction of my life, but it's very much the time wise, it's very accurate description. And the movie is it's kind of concurrent. It deviates a little bit.
Mhm.
For example, it's very difficult to show loneliness on a movie
Mm.
screen.
Mm.
And so the director and the screenplay writer, which I didn't write the movie, they did, showed illness and loneliness, which often go hand in hand, in a way on screen that where people it was palpable.
Mm.
And so there's little twists and turns that weren't necessarily in my book, but were necessary to emote certain emotions on
Yes.
in film and on the screen. So, as an example, I have a foreign husband in the movie, but not in real life.
Mhm.
And part of that is because there's this separation between cultures and language,
Mm.
and you can
Mm.
feel that separation on the screen.
Mm.
So, but the movie does have a hopeful but a honest portrayal of breast cancer. We don't
Mm.
negate the trauma that women go through. We don't pacify the chemo days. We
Mm.
really accurately show the protagonist, which is the patient going through those things and the biopsy
Mm.
scene and the surgery
Mm.
scene. Those are really difficult scenes for and even for myself, but they're
Mhm.
accurate and they're true. And
Mhm.
it's fair because so many people want to see themselves reflected on the screen, but they
Mhm.
don't want that reflection to be negated and
Right.
pacified and almost exploited. They want an honest portrayal. And so that's what we try to give them.
Absolutely. They also want it to not just be packaged and trivial. Just here it
It's
is.
not a Hallmark movie.
Yeah, no, that's good. Who's
Not that I'm negating Hallmark. I do like that
Yeah,
channel.
yeah.
It's
It's
not a
different
Hallmark movie.
genre. Yeah, that just Hallmark, they wouldn't be showing those scenes. Are you allowed to say who's starring in the film?
Yeah, Trisha Helfer is my
Oh.
plays me. Yeah,
Mhm.
she's very well known for Battlestar Galactica,
Yes.
but many, many other things. She's
Yes, yes.
exceptional. She's
Mm,
exceptional at this job.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so and what sort of, reaction have you gotten from other people that have breast cancer? Have you had a lot of mail, and what's the reaction from other women that have had the same challenge?
I feel like they're cheering me on because I feel like, some people don't want to use their voice, but they want to
Mm,
follow somebody that is using their voice. So I've had a lot of women champion for what I'm doing. And that gives me courage because so
mm,
often we go through stages of our life where we don't have courage. I didn't have courage when I was first diagnosed with breast cancer. I didn't have any courage. But my
mm,
friends and family stepped in to show me their courage and to lend me their courage,
mhm,
so to speak,
mhm,
until I could have my courage and I could grasp that courage back and really pour into that. And so I think a lot of women who are first diagnosed see me all these years out. I'm 12 years cancer free, and that
mm,
gives them hope. And they see my
mm,
posts with going back to work and modeling and writing the book and really thriving after a breast cancer
mhm,
diagnosis. And it wasn't just a diagnosis where I had surgery. I had 28 rounds of chemotherapy. I had 15 months of violently being ill from
mm,
chemotherapy. I've had heart issues from chemotherapy. Even 12
mm,
years later, I lost three
mm,
teeth. I
mm,
have a liver spot from it. I mean, I've had complications left and right. So it's not a simple or um it's a complicated story.
right.
But I think people respect me for coming out and talking about losing three teeth because of chemotherapy
Mhm,
or having eye issues because of chemotherapy. Because
mhm.
oftentimes people don't want to talk about it because it's not flattering.
Right, also, we're not hearing all this, it's just I went through that, it was really awful, and we know it's awful, but you're bringing up new things I hadn't heard of, I know it causes all sorts of stuff, but also 15 months of being that's over a year just being sick, and it's also really, um, good that you're saying you didn't have a courage, because I think that
Yeah.
with cancer survivors in general, okay, I'm just thinking, wow, these people are exceptional. They just got the cancer and they were like, they're on board, and it's not the case. You're falling apart, right? And then you finally find some courage and write the book. But I think there's this sort of like misunderstanding that, when people that go through hard stuff, they do have a mourning period of falling apart and being human. And somehow you found the strength from family and friends to get through that. But it wasn't in a minute. It
No.
was not in a minute. It was after much processing and pain and sickness and all sorts of complications. And then the other disease, when you tried to replace them, that's another whole story. So what happened with that? Can you run that one by us?
Yeah, so I had breast implants, which, by the way, I loved them, and I had them for 7 long years. I
Mm,
really, as I told you, I live in Miami, and we wear bathing suits in Florida, and I enjoyed them, but they didn't like me. And I had these symptoms of breast implant illness for several years, but I didn't put I didn't make the connection because most of
mm,
the time I would go to a doctor and say, "Gosh, I'm feeling like I have brain fuzziness and cognitive issues," and they said, "Well, you had so much chemotherapy." So everybody was blaming it on the massive amount of
mm,
chemotherapy I had. But this was years later, and I thought, okay, well, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but ultimately, I had a MRSA infection in my left breast implant, which really almost killed me. I had
mm,
about 104 fever and ended up in emergency surgery at the beginning of COVID in 2020. And I woke up with a concave chest. And it was
mm,
because I had an infection for months before it was diagnosed that I lost skin and
mm,
ultimately any way to have reconstructive surgery. And
mhm.
so it was like I woke up in the hospital at a time when nobody was allowed in the hospital. I was alone. And I
Oh,
woke up to this reality of having a concave chest for the rest of my life. And it was months of physical duress. I mean, the pain was
mm,
grotesque for months.
oh,
And ultimately, I had 3 and 4 mastectomies because they excavate them like a mastectomy. And once
Oh.
I got through the physical pain, that's when I went back to modeling and said to my agent, I said, I need to come back because if
Mhm.
I have courage and I have a very strong self-esteem and I feel this
Mhm.
about this,
Mhm.
I can only imagine women who are afraid to show it to their husbands because I'm getting these
Mm.
messages from people all over the world saying, I
Mm.
don't like what it looks like. I'm afraid of the reality. I'm not
Mm.
showing this to my husband. And I felt like I needed to champion for them and get
Mm.
back on the runway and get back with these brands to say, no, we can do this. It's an
Mhm.
inside job. You have to work on your self esteem.
Right. Which is
Forget the other stuff.
which is astounding for a company like Victoria's Secret, which is not generally associated with that kind of message, right? Like the opposite, the
They
whole
have definitely
Victoria's Secret
shifted.
models, right? Well, thank you for sharing that. I just feel that must have been terrible in
It
COVID
was terrible.
alone, waking up and like, oh my goodness. So they must have just figured it out when you went in that that's the problem.
Yeah, well, it's more graphic than you want to know, but ultimately the infection ate a hole through my skin on my through my chest because
And they noticed that.
I well, it was a hole and it was gushing green fluid
Oh,
out of it.
oh my. So there was no way they couldn't notice it. They could
It
see that
was
this was a problem.
yeah, I mean
Wow.
it was like it was something. It was
It's
something
like a
and
horror movie.
it was like a horror movie and it was coming out
Yes.
of my body and I was like, "Wait, I've already done the breast cancer thing. I've already done the chemo
What
thing. Now what
now?
is happening?" And
Oh,
I
wow.
literally, I'll never forget because nobody could come in the hospital with me. I was going through divorce. My parents lived a
Oh.
couple hours away. And I called my mom and I said, I'm going into surgery. I have no idea what's going to happen. I had no idea. And I said,
Mm,
and I have to put my phone in a locker. I
right.
had to put my phone in a locker
Because of
because
COVID?
no, because nobody was there. Like there was
Oh, because nobody to hold your phone or
nobody to
safeguard it.
hold my hand, nobody to sit by my
Terrible.
bedside, nobody to hold my phone. Nobody was allowed in because it was COVID.
Yes.
It was March, April, and then June of 2020.
How did you get through that?
That was tough. And I was going
Oh.
through a divorce.
Oh my goodness. That must have been one of the worst moments of your
It
life
was tough.
after the cancer.
That was tough.
You thought
Then,
you had the worst moment, but then there was another one. Aw.
well, I sometimes when you feel like you're just in this pressure cooker,
Mm,
the pressure cooker makes diamonds. And I
mhm.
feel like I came out of it with this just bursting of energy to help people because I
Wow.
felt so much pain.
Right. Okay. Wow, that's just another whole story. So what you said was interesting. So for people that might have breast implants and are having symptoms, maybe it would be helpful for you just to go through some of those symptoms
Yeah.
for people that aren't feeling well who have breast implants because they might not know that's the problem, right?
So, yeah, and I'm not an expert in any way
No,
on
of
this.
course not. No, this is not medical advice. This is
Absolutely not.
just certain symptoms you
That
noticed.
I had. I
Yes.
can only speak from my experience. I had
Yeah.
joint pain.
Mhm.
I was very lethargic. I had
Mm.
brain fog
Mhm.
and I had just kind of this feeling of malaise and I couldn't
Mm.
pinpoint what was wrong.
Mm.
And I know other people because I'm on a documentary about breast implant illness called cyclicone.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of the other symptoms are related to like your nervous system and,
Mhm.
you know, can mirror other diseases,
Mhm.
which is why a lot of people get misdiagnosed. But if you have symptoms that are kind of unexplained and you have
Mhm.
implants, I would ask a doctor if that could be related.
Mm. Right. Because any infection can make you feel that way, but it could be if they don't know what it is. Because you never know. Somebody might listen and say, "Hey, I have breast implants and I'm feeling that way. Maybe I should check it out." Again, this is not medical advice, but I don't think
Absolutely not.
we're doing any harm by telling people to go see a doctor, and not that we're a doctor. So, well, this has been what a story. I'm very interested in seeing the movie. So, Christine, what is one thing that you want to share with all people,
Yeah.
just about life, mindset, philosophy? What's one thing you want to leave us with?
Well, I think that one thing that I remind myself all the time is that grace should be extended to yourself. We so often give people grace. If they're late or they drive right in front of us, we're like, oh, okay, give that person grace. They're going through a hard day, whatever. But the people that we're not graceful towards are ourselves. We're
Mm,
so hard on ourselves, and that it's an uncomfortable position to be in And so if we can find a way to give ourselves more grace on a daily basis, if you work that into your life, you focus on that, peace comes with that. It's a very
Mm,
peaceful way to live.
Okay, so the message is be more self-loving and stop knocking yourself down all the time and
It's
just be,
tough to it's a tough world
yeah,
to live in. Give
yeah.
yourself a break.
Got it. Okay, that's a mic drop. Christine, this was a great interview. Thank you so much for coming on. This is Business Wealth Impact. Please share this. Please subscribe. Please love it. And we'll see you on the next episode. You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.